If your vehicle is equipped with a locking lug nut, you're going to want to have it ready. Get it to fit on there. These are 19 millimeter. Take our breaker bar, loosen them up, about half a turn. Once you've loosened your lug nuts, raise and support your vehicle. We're going to use a lift for this, so it'll make it easier for you to see what we're doing. But you can do this on jack stands in your driveway. These are pretty loose now. I'm going to take my socket in my hand and undo them with my hands. And I'm doing the last one. Just make sure you've got hold of the wheel. It might come loose. This one came off pretty easy. I'm going to remove the two 12 millimeter slide pin bolts. Get the top one loose, and get the bottom one loose. I'm going to switch to a ratcheting wrench. So put these two slide pin bolts aside so you don't lose them. I've got a bungee cord here. I'm just going to place it right there for now. I'm going to work this caliper off. If it doesn't come off very easily, you can get a large flat-headed screwdriver or a pry bar and pry it off. And I'm going to take the caliper and our bungee cord, and I'm just going to wrap it around the suspension, just because we don't want it to fall or hang on this rubber brake line. You don't need to undo the caliper from the brake line. Just going to check these slide pins to make sure they're free. They should move fairly easily in and out, just like that. The rubber boot comes off, that's okay. You can just push it back up. Now we can get the brake pads out. You can use a flat bladed screwdriver or a pry bar. I'm going to use a pry bar. Just work them out. Same for the inside. Next, remove the 14 millimeter caliper bolts, caliper bracket bolts. There's a bottom one here and a top one here. 14 millimeter wrench. If they're really stuck, take a rubber mallet or a dead blow. I'm going to hit on the wrench. Those free, I'm going to switch to a ratcheting 14 millimeter wrench. All right. Those are pretty loose. Use your other hand to hold on to the bracket so it doesn't fall. I'm going to take our bolts that we took out that were holding the bracket on. I'm going to thread them back into the bracket so we don't lose them. I'm going to spray some rust penetrant oil around the hub here and on these screws that we need to remove that are holding the brake rotor to the hub. I'm going to use a large Phillips head socket attachment on a 3/8 drive ratchet to remove these. So make sure your parking brake is released. Parking brake is inside this part of the brake rotor. There might be a rust ridge in there that will catch on the brake shoes. This rotor should come off without too much effort. If it gets really stuck, you can put 8mm by 125 bolts in here to help push it off. Before I put the bolts in here, I'm going to spray some rust penetrant oil on the threads. The bolts that I'm using have a 12mm head, so I'm going to use my ratcheting wrench, and we're going to go evenly on each side. Now I've got it free. You can see that's your parking brake assembly, and sometimes they just get held up. A rust ridge builds up in here and the shoes get held up on it. So now is a good time to inspect your parking brake assembly and replace any parts as necessary. These pads are in really good shape, or shoes. They've got plenty of material on them, especially on an automatic car. This doesn't get used very much. There is some penetrating oil that got in here from spraying down the hub. I'm gonna take some brake parts cleaner at this time and just spray it out. I'm gonna make sure these pads stay nice and clean. Here we have our old rotor and pads from our vehicle. Here is the new rotor and pads from 1aauto.com. You can see that the old pad comes with backing plates, shims, as do the new pads. Comes with the wear indicators. These pads are getting pretty thin than the original ones. Now's a good time to replace them. See, the rotors are identical, same amount of lug holes, same screw holes, same pusher thread holes. Inside it has the same parking brake setup hub. These should fit great on your car and give you great stopping. We're also going to switch over this rubber plug. We're going to put it in our new rotor. Just going to push it out from the back. Almost got away from me there. Take our new one, push it in, and you're all set. If your hub is really rusty, you should take a wire brush and just knock some of the rust off. This one's in pretty good shape, so I'm going to leave it alone. We'll take our rotor, we're going to put it on inside out. Take brake parts cleaner, clean it. Clean the inside, because that's where your parking brake shoes will ride. Now I can flip it over. We're going to line up these holes with the holes in the hub. So the reason why you clean these brake rotors before you use them is because when they're shipped with a light coating of oil or cosmoline to prevent surface rust, and you don't want that into your brake pads. I'm going to take our small Phillips head screws here, I'm going to reinstall them. I'm just going to go till they get tight. All these do is hold the rotor in place while you're working, so the rotor's not flopping around while you're trying to With the rotor installed the correct way, I'm going to take my brake parts cleaner and finish cleaning it. If there's really heavy stuff, you take a rag, wipe it down. The wear on this inside pad looks a little bit uneven. It's got a bit of a slope to it. It's not straight, it should be nice and straight. So that typically means that one of these caliper slides may be sticking. This one's a little hard to move. This one's fairly easy to move. I'm going to pull one out. Start with this one. If you need to, you can take a little pick, carefully pop this boot over it. pin looks a little bit dry. I'll wipe it off with a rag. Make sure you don't lose the little rubber piece that's on the end of it. Take some brake caliper grease and grease it up. And reinsert it back into the caliper. Those can take a little bit of force, usually because there's some air stuck in there. So then what I'll do is squish it in and use my pick to sort of let some of the air out. And work that boot back up into the groove. And that's got a lot smoother movement on it now. The reason why it's pushing out, there's probably an air pocket in there. So you can just open this up and squish it down. That's okay, we'll push that back together when we put the caliper on. We'll do the same thing for this one. Boot already came off the little lip here. Take a flat bladed screwdriver to remove the brake pad clips. These are typically stainless, they don't really rust. They just get full of dirt. So we're going to pop them out and clean them. I like to use the old box to keep all the dirt and grit and brake parts cleaner in one place, because we're going to spray them with brake parts cleaner. Take a wire brush, scrub where the pads ride. Take a paper towel and just wipe them down. If you want, you can take your wire brush and clean right here, some of the rust out. A little brake parts cleaner. Same to the other side. Now we can reinstall our clips. They just snap back into place. Reinstall the caliper bracket on the car. Hold it in place with one hand. Take my bolts. Might have to wiggle it around. This one went in pretty easy. I'm just going to thread it down by hand. I'm going to take our inside pad. I'm going to spray it with some brake parts cleaner. Just want to make sure that the surface is clean, doesn't have any grease or oil on it. Take a little bit of grease, caliper grease. Put it on the edge. I'm going to start in the bottom slot. Push it up against the rotor. That's a little too much. You don't need much. Sit it in the lower tab. Slide in the upper one. Before we reinstall the caliper, we need to compress this piston back into the brake caliper. So I'm going to take the old brake pad. I'm going to take our C-clamp, get it sort of in place. Be a little tricky with one hand. Now, just going to rest the rotor on the top of the dust shield. So hold it with one hand and just slowly thread it in so it compresses the piston into the caliper. I'm just going to go to the pad, bottoms out on the edge of the caliper. Just like that. We can undo our bungee cord. Also take it off the suspension so I don't forget it. Make sure these pads are nice and tight against the rotor. We're going to roll our caliper down. You may need to just push this pin in. These pins have little flat spots that will line up with the caliper. And that way, as you're threading in your slide pin bolts, they won't spin. You just want to make sure that those are lined up correctly. Now I've got these caliper slide pin bolts started by hand. I take my 12mm ratchet wrench. Use a 14mm socket and extension. Torque the top caliper bracket bolt to 41 foot-pounds. Just a 14mm socket and the torque wrench on the bottom one. Watch out for your ABS wire. You may need to move it out of the way. Torque it to 41 foot-pounds. Torque the caliper slide pin bolts to 27 foot-pounds. 12mm socket. Reinstall the wheel. Thread the lug nuts on by hand. 19mm socket and ratchet. I'm going to snug these lug nuts. The torque wrench set to 80 foot-pounds. Torque your lug nuts in a star pattern. Before you drive the vehicle, gently press the brake pedal about a third of the way, repeatedly until it gets hard. Once you feel the brake pedal become hard, the job is complete and you're ready to drive the vehicle.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at oneauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.